Joining me is Aaron William Freeland. And when you talk about news, should you take it lightly? Should you? I got to tell you, Aaron, the first thing I'm going to say is we take news too seriously. When I say news, I mean ordinary stuff. Of course, there's stuff that, well, I'll tell you what news takes away in your mind seriousness. For example, just to do a little test here. When the President of the United States says, shine bright lights inside your body, devour bleach to ensure that you don't end up with COVID, is that news that would that fit into the category of you can't take it seriously?
It all depends on the magnitude of the falsehood that he's trying to spin at that particular time. I'll be honest with you. I think everybody understood the whole idea of taking light internally or using cleaning agents as some sort of internal cleanse because it does a horrible number on the lungs was not necessarily meant to be taken seriously, but at the same time, it's borderline cuckoo bananas.
Who it's coming from. That's my whole point. News used to be very stoic, reserved, factual, point by point by point. You didn't get dizzy. The news could make you dizzy, but the delivery didn't make you dizzy. The politicians, you could agree or disagree with them, but you didn't get dizzy. From what was being said. Now it seems to me that we have to have a second sense to understand when the news is just kidding, when the news is don't even bother paying attention, and then finally the news that you should pay attention to, the news that you should understand, and the news that you should try to think about seriously based on where we live, which is a democratic society. So to impact on what you do about what you're hearing. It's very complicated now. We've got now, I'm going to skip Canada and we'll go to what we talked about yesterday if we had time, because I had a chance to watch those videos. But what if this thing they call Twitter fact checking that they've done with the President of the United States, and now POTUS number 45. Number 45 now says, I'm going to make sure that you guys, I'm going to get you under control. Did you ever think that a democratic society, let alone the United States, would have a president who would try? I mean, it's not like it just started today, but I think he hit another, the bars. I don't know, was it going up or down, or you know what I mean? Like, tell me your reaction to the president and his idea to take on Twitter, because Twitter has decided to, mail-in voting is not fraudulent. It isn't predisposed to being fraudulent, and he's basically not telling the truth. They disagree with his version of facts.
My thinking on that is this: if mail fraud is as common as the president believes, then nobody would have received their stimulus checks.
Absolutely. And a whole bunch of them would have got 2 or 3.
Exactly. Because that's the whole thing behind mail fraud, is you're not supposed to get your mail. So in this particular case here, the president is, I feel, incorrect. And I think a social media platform saying you're kind of lying about this is not beyond the pale. The president's insistence that he can and will get them in line and will make you toe the line and behave runs contrary to the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. The government shall make no law with respect to communications. He can't make them fall in line.
Understood.
So the fact that he doesn't understand his own constitution that he's supposed to be serving is a legitimate cause of concern.
Do you really think he has any clue of what the Constitution? Well, look, you can say anything you want. You have freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's an old axiom. It's one that I remember from growing up, that freedom of speech is about having an opinion and sharing it. But that opinion, just because you have it, doesn't mean it has the right to be floated, right? It's not guaranteed. Like you can't put on a swastika and say blah 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 blah. People are going to shut you down, right? Because we have, as a society, we have, and Americans are very proud of this. These words mean a lot to America: checks and balances. You know, there have to be checks and balances on everybody. That doesn't mean, Aaron, before you come on the show, I don't want you to use the word the. I don't want you to use the word and. You have the freedom to use whatever words you want to use, unless they're offensive. You know, foul language. That doesn't mean I'm taking away your opportunity to talk on the program if I tell you can't use certain bomb words, right? I'm not saying I'm curbing your speech. And if you have an opinion, if I'm saying to you, by the way, you're not telling the truth, that's not curbing your speech.
No, not in the slightest.
That is, in fact, the exercise that is free speech. The whole point of free speech is for you to have an opinion and me have the opportunity to combat what you're saying, like a debate, right? We all get to espouse our facts, our beliefs, and then let the majority and or common sense between the two of us land wherever it lands us.
Limiting my free speech would be.
Yes.
But you understand what I'm talking about, right?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
That's not what's happening at all. The president is free to say
No.
whatever he likes on whatever platform he so chooses. Because Twitter is a private enterprise, they have the right to limit what he can and cannot say. In this particular case here, they've chosen to call him out for falsehoods. If he decides to try to punish them legally, he does not have a leg to stand on. It's kind of the way it works.
You know, there's no doubt about that. And the problem is his favorite words are, I'm the president, I can do what I want, I can say what I want, and I can believe and tell you to do whatever I want. And all three of those things aren't true. And people have to start standing up to him, and people like him. You know, he's an anarchist. It's all he is. He's not a Democrat. He's not a Republican. He's an anarchist. From his narrow perspective, he's a dictator, and he does it every day. And because he's the president, many people are afraid to, I'm going to ask you this opinion. This is what I believe, but people are afraid to cut him at the quick because he is the president. They cut him slack because he is the president. Do you feel that too?
I feel he gets far too much leeway from members of the White House press corps that are either afraid or unwilling to take him on, just based on the fact that he has a perceived position of power. And
but beyond the reporters, I think of a large segment of society, and I don't just mean in the United States, I mean in Canada too, because by the way, there are some people in Canada who love what he's doing. By the way.
Yeah, every society has them. Everyone has a group that they believe he's a populist. They believe that he is the next coming. He's the rebirth of JFK, or pick your insert dictator's name here. And they think that he's going to do good for them, but it's going to come back to bite them. And it's like getting bitten by a tiger when you voted for the Tigers Biting People Party.
Yes,
it's going to happen.
Then you find out that he bites you too.
Mm-hmm. As long as he bites everybody else, they're fine with it. But as soon as he turns around and bites them, there's the problem.
Well, there was an old, and I'm not comparing him to the Nazis, but when growing up, I grew up in a mixed race neighborhood: Italians, Jews, blacks, whites, white Anglo-Saxon Canadians. It was very diverse. And one of the things that the Jewish community always reminded me, and my Jewish friends always reminded me about, was that the problem with humanity is, the saying that they used in Germany, they came for the people down the street, I'm paraphrasing, they came for my neighbors, Then they came for my neighbor beside me, and we did nothing. And then they came for me. And that unfortunately is, and I'm paraphrasing. The point is, until we have a saying in my culture, the Italian culture, it refers to the fact that when what only hurts me is what I feel directly. It's a saying I'm trying to translate. It has to do with blood. When my blood is hurt, when my body is hurt, it hurts me. Nothing else hurts. If someone else, but to who the pain is administered, that's basically the best way I can describe it. And unfortunately, many of us sometimes don't. Empathy is not a guaranteed reaction by human beings. It is one that in some ways has to be learned, because the other kind of behavior has to be unlearned if it isn't learned in the first place. So I frown upon what I see, and it is kind of sad, right? Because we as human beings, I think, I'm not sure, for the most part, have a generosity, a kindness, and a cooperativeness. And I guess because I live in that world, and I forget that the real reality of human beings is they're tribalists. I think that's the true nature of human beings. They're tribalists, and which means, what tribe am I? What tribe are you? And that tells us how we're going to get along.
It's supposed to be in human nature to be empathetic, but we are conditioned by the society we live in to be selfish.
Yeah,
and to be self-centered.
And not very considerate. And unfortunately, we talk about cities and talk about the rat race, and it seems to be where we're at. So the president is going to act against Twitter, he thinks. The problem with that theory is what we've seen many times with the president and with certain politicians who step over the edge. They get there, but then eventually somebody on their team pulls them back. And this guy's been pulled back. The president has been pulled back a few times, where he's made threats and he's said things that have, they've tried to put the genie back in the bottle. Do you think that'll happen this time?
I'm wondering, at what point does the Republican Party stop trying to bail him out and cut him loose? Because at this point here, there are enough swing states that are currently up in the air that could switch sides from Republican to Democrat. They could go blue. And I'm not sure if the party wants to continue to risk that, because if there is a tectonic shift in American politics to the left, if everybody decides that we do want to run back and embrace a centrist Barack Obama style type as typified by Joe Biden. And yeah, I know, I see your face twitching there, Frank. It's doing that thing it does whenever I talk. But if the pendulum does swing the other way, it's how far it's going to go the other way. That is the concern. And if the Republicans want to either cushion that swing or try to keep from fading to irrelevancy. I'd like to hope
I don't.
Go ahead.
I don't think the pendulum's going to swing that far, because in reality, well, sorry, I want to make clear what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's going to swing that far past center, is why I was giving you the look, because it's so far to the right now. It's so far to the right. For them to go to the center, it would be amazing. That's why the confused look on my face, because it would be
a
going to the middle now would left. Well, it wouldn't to the left, the center, because the fact remains, in the world today, you were talking and you used the term populist. For our listeners and viewers, define populist in your terms.
The one who starts
a populist. What's a populist?
He strikes a chord in the popular zeitgeist, and is the person that most people who feel they've been disenfranchised by the previous government can flock to. Whether he's actually more popular or not, he appeals to the most common denominator. I hesitate to say lowest, because that's not necessarily the case, but he does appeal to more people.
John Kennedy, Adolf Hitler, both populists?
Yes.
So when you say a populist, and when people hear the term populist, it doesn't refer to a political position. It refers to a position garnered by striking a chord, by saying what the majority of a majority of the people, or enough of a majority of the people that react to, and it's a bell that gets rung that they hear, you know, and sometimes with populists, like with this populist in Trump, they have terms like dog whistle. They basically, where he says things, he says certain things that send a message that most people don't really hear. And that is a big tool of some populists, especially populists that are up to conning people and not giving them what they're saying. They're saying one thing, but they're actually doing something else. So being a populist is
not
a bad thing.
Well, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily a good thing. It's his ability to play groups off each other. And we're talking about the truck ball having, pickup truck driving, shotgun toting people in certain parts of the United States that feel that they've been disrespected by people on the coasts, those who are more affluent, right? That's literally the base definition, is you appeal to people who feel that they've been marginalized or ignored. And, you know,
now we have Governor Cuomo, the son of Mario Cuomo, and he talked today. And when he started talking, I started saying to myself, "Oh, okay, keep talking like that. You're just driving people to Trump." And what he was talking about, Aaron, was talking about how states like California, New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, these states support all the other states. They, you know, it's like in Canada, for the Canadians that watch the show, Quebec takes more out of what the federal government taxes. They get a little extra, more than everybody else. There's the have-nots and the have provinces, all that kind of stuff. Well, for those of you that are American, that's what you just heard Cuomo talk about. And here in Canada, we've heard that all the time. There are a lot of people in the West who feel that the East gets all the advantages, and they get, they basically support the East. But the fact is, for example, when they say that, Ontario brings back from the taxes a lot less than what they put in. Ontarians don't get more out of the federal government than they put in. That's a different case for some other provinces. We used to not be a have-not province. Now we are a have-not province. New York and Governor Cuomo is concerned because the burden of what's going on today, the major populations, where coincidentally, and New York was the hardest hit with the pandemic, they're asking for some help. And his beef is that his state gives a lot in taxes and gets far less back. And in fact, after the pandemic, his concern is they're even going to get less, and the other states, like, for example, the swing states, are going to get more money from Trump. So he was talking about that. My reaction to that, and I want to ask you yours, when a person in his position starts talking about how terribly they're treated, and he's predicting that under this administration or under this government, they're going to treat his state even worse and treat the other states even better. Is he not promoting Trump's agenda by doing that?
No, I think he's pointing out Trump's agenda. He's pointing out Trump's agenda. For instance, at one point, Trump said, well, we'll make sure that people get PPEs, but certain states who like me will get PPEs faster than certain states who don't. Point blank, he up and said that. So it's a very obvious message that states like New York, who didn't vote Republican, are going to end up seeing less money, are going to end up seeing less support than counties and states that voted for Trump.
That's at least what he says out loud. Like, he says it out loud. That's the scariest thing when it comes to, this president, is that he says stuff out loud that I don't think I would have ever have thought a politician would say out loud.
Or
Like,
should ever
and I
say
guess
out
that's
loud.
why certain people, well, I guess that's why people like him. I mean, can we agree that governments make a lot of mistakes and governments do some stupid things, and there've been some politicians in government that you want to just, what's wrong with you? And they come up with these, these types of legislation and ideas, and you just want to go, stop it. And then you get a guy who comes in and basically, literally feeds on the teat of that kind of thinking process, but he really isn't the solution. He just wants to get power. So, he massages the negative nature of certain people or groups, or the deep state, as they like to talk about, and then brings in his own version of the deep state.
I mean, right now he's
How
surrounding
come people
himself
don't
with
see that?
flunkies and cronies. It's a ignorance is bliss. They prefer not to see it. Everything is going my way for a change, so I'm not going to worry about it. This previous administration didn't represent me because it was a black man. Now there's a white man in power. So,
That doesn't
hey,
like black people.
well, exactly. Hey, I don't like black people either. That's why I voted for Trump. I mean, it's pretty much what it
But he
boils down
doesn't
to.
say it. That's
No,
why that term, the dog whistle, the dog
Exactly.
whistle thing is a perfect example of why that term means so much to me. It's a pitch that you don't hear, but the people who are like people who want to hear it, they know exactly what he's saying. It's relatable to them, and so other people don't get it. It kind of catches them by surprise, which is scary, to say the least. So
I'm waiting for him to drop a 14 or an 88 reference sometime in a speech.
You think?
Sooner rather than later. Probably as soon as things are opened up again for him to hold rallies.
Well, that's the demand that he's making. And can we compare to Canada and bring this around to Canada? Normally we like to talk about Canada first and then the US. The premier in Ontario is livid. A report comes in that the old age homes have been, they've been run very improperly. And there have been some real scary things. And the Army went in there to help, and they put out a report. And now the premier is unavailable for comment, but everybody else around him is there, and they're answering questions. But he's sort of not gone into hiding, but I think he's gathering his thoughts and doing some homework. I assume, right? This is something that in Ontario specifically, where we have offloaded healthcare, all kinds of stuff over the past few years. Are you surprised? I know I'm not. I'm going to tell you, I'm not surprised that this happened, because when you tell people that you can have this as a business and now you run it like a business, and here's what I'm going to say when it comes to what we're seeing is what's wrong with COVID and what makes it so dangerous. Because they were allowed to do whatever they wanted and nobody was around, with no checks and balances, people get lazy. This isn't about maliciousness only. This can also be people get lazy, and this is an opportunity for people to, I really don't want to be here. So I'm not surprised, but I don't think this is as evil as some people are trying to portray it. How do you take that?
It's not evil, it's negligence. It's not willful maliciousness. It's,
for the most part. It's not to suggest that doesn't exist, right?
There are cases where residents have been beaten maliciously.
Yikes.
There is a case of Elizabeth Wetlaufer, who killed 8 people over the course of 10 years through 7 different homes. There are cases going back as far as 2003, 2004. The press has been writing stories about the incredibly crappy conditions, and this goes all the way back to Mike Harris, through Ernie Eves, Dalton McGuinty, Elizabeth Wynne, and now Doug Ford. Doug has finally decided that he's going to take responsibility for it, because the ball stops with me.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I think what we can leave it at is that When government says we want to have less controls, sometimes that leads to less controls. And when you have less controls, bad things happen when people are set free to do whatever they want. And they don't have to be
Indeed.
doing anything malicious. It could just be, it's easier, it's cheaper, and or I'm busy, you know.
Yep.
So Aaron, thank you for being on the program. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you later. And of course, it was a pleasure having you on. For everybody that's been tuning in, this has been, of course, Newsflash on the BarnBurner TV Network, and of course on Zingo TV Channel 250. Remember to download the free BarnBurner and Zingo TV apps for Android and iOS devices. Thank you, Aaron William Freeland. It was a pleasure being on with you.
Thank you for having me, Frank.
Scary